My wife's navy blue BMW was parked in my father's reserved parking spot at the company. It was only 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, and Jessica should have been at her law firm across town. I pulled my car over to the side of the street, my heart racing as I stared up at the third-floor windows where the boardroom was located. The curtains were closed, something my father never did during business hours. Maybe it's just a meeting, I muttered to myself, trying to find an innocent explanation for this strange situation. My name is Peter, I'm 34 years old, and until 5 minutes ago, I believed I had the most perfect life in the world. I've been married for 8 years to Jessica, a brilliant and ambitious lawyer I met in college. She always said she fell in love with my determination and my last name, Miller, which carried the weight of a family construction company founded by my grandfather in the 60s. My father, Robert Miller, at 62, still ran Miller Construction with a steady hand. He was respected in the city, a member of the Rotary Club, and always treated me as his natural successor. For years, I worked hard to earn his trust, sacrificing weekends and holidays to prove that I was worthy of the family legacy. Jessica seemed to admire that dedication. She attended business dinners, smiled at important clients, and made sure to mention her wonderful in-laws whenever she could. I felt like the luckiest man in the world to have found a woman who not only loved me, but also respected my family and our values. I entered the building through the back, using my office key. The elevator made that familiar noise as it rose to the third floor. The hallway was deserted. Most of the employees had left for a late lunch. I walked toward my father's office, but stopped when I heard muffled voices coming from inside. Voices I knew very well. Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything? It was my wife's voice, but with a tone I had never heard before. Intimate. Affectionate in a way she rarely used with me lately. Peter is too naive, my father replied, and the contempt in his voice hit me like a punch in the stomach. He always has been. He works like a dog thinking he'll inherit all this one day. Her laughter was like shards of glass. Poor thing. If he only knew we'd already changed all the company documents. My legs almost gave way. I leaned against the wall, feeling the world spin around me. In 6 months, when we announce our relationship and the divorce is final, Miller Construction will be ours, my father continued. Peter will get the crumbs, if he's lucky. What if he decides to fight? Jessica asked. With what money? The joint account you have will be emptied next week. Besides, who's going to believe him when they find out about his alcohol problems? Alcohol problems? I barely drank socially. You're brilliant, Robert, Jessica sighed. I don't know how I managed to marry your son when I should have stuck with his father from the start. I walked out of there like a zombie, not quite sure how I got to my car. Sitting in the driver's seat, my hands shaking, I tried to process what I had just heard. My wife and my father. Together. Planning to destroy me financially and emotionally. But as I drove back home, passing the familiar streets of my childhood, something began to boil inside my chest. It wasn't just anger or pain. It was something colder, more calculated. They thought I was too naive to suspect anything. They thought I would accept any explanation they gave me. They thought they knew Peter Miller. If you're enjoying this story of betrayal and family revenge, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to discover even more shocking stories. But what they didn't know was that I had inherited more than my grandfather's determination. I had also inherited his business acumen and his memory for details. And in the days that followed, they would discover just how dangerous it can be to underestimate a Miller. Over the next week, I did something I had never done before. I started paying attention. Jessica came home every day at 7 p.m., always with the same excuse about late meetings with clients. But when I discreetly called her office on Thursday at 6:30, the secretary told me she had left at 5. Where were you? I asked casually when she walked in, kicking off her high heels that cost more than my weekly salary. Meeting with a Morrison client, she replied without hesitation, kissing my cheek with those lips that I now knew lied so easily. You know how business people are. They want to talk until they're blue in the face. Morrison. I called him the next day, pretending to confirm some details about a company project. The conversation was revealing. Jessica? I haven't seen her in at least 2 months, Morrison said, confused. Why do you ask? Because my wife had been using his name as an alibi for weeks. I began to notice other details that had previously gone unnoticed. Like how Jessica always knew details about Miller construction projects before I even told her. Like how she asked specifically about the shopping center project, where we were investing $2 million, money that came from the loan secured by my stake in the company. "How's that shopping center coming along?" she would ask over coffee, with an interest I interpreted as affection for my profession. "Your father must be very proud of the progress." Very proud, indeed. Too proud, considering that the project had significant delays that could cost us our share of the contract. My father, for his part, began to act strangely toward me at the office. Important meetings took place without me being invited. Documents disappeared from my desk. When I questioned decisions that had been made, he responded with irritation. "Peter, you need to trust the process more," he would say, adjusting his reading glasses as he signed papers I didn't recognize. "Not everything has to go through you. I'm still the president of this company." That was true, but for years he had included me in every important decision. Now I felt like a stranger in the business I had helped build. The most disturbing change was in the family dynamic. Jessica, who had always been respectful but distant toward my father, suddenly began treating him with an intimacy that made me uncomfortable. "Robert, you look tired," she would say during Sunday dinners, touching his arm in a way she never touched mine. "You're working too hard." "It's the price of success, my dear," he would reply, smiling at her in a way that made my stomach churn. Honey. He had never called Jessica honey before. And then there were the phone calls. Jessica had always been discreet with her cell phone, but recently she had started leaving the room to take calls. When I asked who it was, she gave vague answers. Work, or my mom, or no one important. One night, when she was in the shower, her phone rang on the nightstand. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. Robert M. Robert M. My father. Why would my father be calling my wife at 11 o'clock at night? I didn't answer, of course. But I lay awake until 3 in the morning, listening to Jessica breathing beside me, wondering how many other calls like that I had missed. The next day, I went to the bank to check our accounts. What I discovered was even worse than I had imagined. Our joint savings account, which should have had $50,000 saved over the years, had only $12,000. When I asked for a detailed statement, I saw regular transfers to an account I didn't recognize. "Who does this account belong to?" I asked the manager. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller, but I can't provide information about third-party accounts. But I can confirm that these transfers were authorized by your wife, who has power of attorney over this account." Power of attorney that I had given Jessica 3 years ago when she said she wanted to help with the household finances. $38,000. Transferred over 6 months to a mysterious account. That night, during dinner, I watched Jessica and my father with new eyes. The way they avoided looking directly at each other. How Jessica anticipated what my father was going to say before he spoke. How they both seemed to share inside jokes I didn't understand. "How was your day, honey?" I asked Jessica, testing the waters. "Busy, as usual. I had to stay late organizing documents for a very demanding client." She smiled, cutting her steak with surgical precision. "And you, Dad? How was work?" "Productive. We finalized some important contracts. I think you'll be impressed with this quarter's numbers." Numbers I hadn't seen. Contracts I didn't know about. It was at that moment that I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, I called a private investigator who had worked for Miller Construction on employee fraud cases. His name was Dave Richardson, a former police officer, discreet and efficient. "Dave, I need a personal favor," I said, closing my office door. "Completely confidential." "What do you need, Peter?" "I want you to investigate my wife. And my father." The silence on the other end of the line lasted a few seconds. "Are you sure about this, kid? This kind of investigation can reveal things you're not prepared to hear." After what I heard in his office last week, I believe I already know the truth. I just need proof. But what Dave would discover over the next few days would surpass even my worst nightmares about family betrayal. Dave Richardson called me 3 days later, at 7 o'clock on a Friday morning. "Peter, we need to talk. In person." What I found out is complicated. We met at a cafe across town, far from anywhere Jessica or my father could see us. Dave had a grim expression I had never seen in his 10 years working for our company. Before I begin, he said, sliding a manila folder across the table, I want you to know that I've checked this 3 times. There's no mistake. The first photographs showed Jessica and my father getting in and out of a motel on the highway. Not once, but on 12 different occasions over the course of 2 months. The images were dated and time-stamped. They meet every Tuesday and Thursday at 5 in the afternoon, Dave explained. Always the same room. Always cash. My hand shook slightly as I turned the page, but I kept looking. But that's not even the worst part, Peter. The next few pages contained copies of bank documents that made my blood run cold. The mysterious account Jessica had transferred our $38,000 to was a joint account between her and my father. They opened this account 8 months ago, Dave continued. But the activity started earlier. Look at this. He pointed to a series of regular deposits. $20,000 a month, all coming from Miller Construction. Company money was being funneled directly into their secret account. How is this possible? I muttered. Your father has complete access to the company's finances. He created a shell subcontractor called M&J Consulting. Guess what the initials stand for? Miller and Jessica. They were stealing from the company using my family's name. Over the last 8 months, $240,000 has been transferred to this account. Officially, payments for consulting services that were never rendered. $240,000. That was more money than I earned in 3 years' salary. There's more, Dave said, turning to the next section. I looked into the so-called alcohol problems your father mentioned. The following pages showed forged medical receipts from a rehabilitation clinic in Atlanta. Documents that claimed I had been treated for alcohol addiction over the past 6 months. Jessica has had power of attorney over your medical records since you got married. She used that to create a fake medical history. If you get divorced, these documents could be used to question your ability to make financial decisions or take care of children. Children. Jessica and I had been trying to have kids for years, but she always said it wasn't the right time. Now I wondered if she had lied about that too. Dave, I said, forcing the words through my tight throat, how long have they been planning this? He hesitated before answering. Peter, I found emails between them dating back 2 years. Not just about the money. About you. The next section of the folder contained printouts of emails that made me feel physically sick. He's getting suspicious about the company hours, Jessica had written. Maybe we should speed up the timeline. Patience, my dear, my father had replied. Peter has always been slow to connect the dots. As long as he thinks he's being groomed to succeed me, he won't question anything. And there was more. Much more. The boy is so desperate to impress me that he signs anything I put in front of him, another email from my father said. Yesterday he authorized the transfer of $50,000 for equipment, without even reading the document. I remembered that day. My father had arrived late in the afternoon, saying there was a unique opportunity to buy used machinery from a company that was closing down. I trusted him completely. It wasn't equipment, Peter, Dave said gently. It was another deposit into their secret account. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was systemic, calculated, elaborated over years. There's one more thing, Dave said, pulling a digital recorder from his pocket. I managed to install a device in your father's office yesterday. What they said is going to be hard to hear. He pressed play. My father's voice echoed through the empty cafe. Jessica, honey, Peter signed the refinancing papers for the house today. In 6 months, when we're officially separated, the property will technically be ours. He lost the house without even knowing it. Jessica's laughter was like breaking glass. He's so pathetic, Robert. He works so hard to impress you, he doesn't realize he's digging his own grave. The boy has always been naive. Even as a child, he believed anything I told him. He's no different now. Boy. My father was talking about me as if I were an easily manipulated child. When are you going to tell him about us? Jessica asked. After we transfer the rest of the company funds. 2 more months and we'll have $500,000 clean. Then we can get rid of him completely. Get rid of me. As if I were a problem to be eliminated. Dave turned off the tape recorder and watched me process the information. Peter, they're not just having an affair. They're plotting the most elaborate theft I've ever seen. And they plan to leave you not only broke, but with your reputation destroyed. I left that cafe walking like a man in a trance. The familiar streets of my hometown seemed strange, as if I were seeing everything through a distorted lens. When I got home, Jessica was in the kitchen preparing dinner, humming a song I didn't recognize. She was wearing a new dress that cost more than I made in a week. "Hi, honey," I said, kissing her cheek. "How was your day?" How was my day? I had discovered that my wife and father were systematically stealing from me, destroying my reputation, and planning to leave me penniless. It was enlightening, I replied. Jessica didn't notice the irony in my voice. She was too busy preparing dinner with expensive ingredients that I now knew had been bought with stolen money. "Oh, I forgot to mention," she said casually, stirring the sauce on the stove. "Your father called earlier. He wants to schedule a meeting tomorrow to discuss some company investments. He said there's an opportunity in Miami that could be very lucrative." Miami. The same city where they had rented an apartment with the stolen money, according to the documents Dave had discovered. What kind of investment? I asked. He didn't go into details. "You know how secretive your father is about business." She smiled, and for a moment I forgot that smile had lied to me for years. That night, lying next to the woman who had spent 2 years planning my destruction, I made a decision that would change everything. They thought I was naive. They thought I would never suspect anything. They thought they could manipulate me indefinitely while stealing my inheritance, my future, and my dignity. But what Jessica and my father didn't know was that I had inherited more than determination from my family. I had also inherited the patience for long games and the intelligence to win wars, not just battles. While Jessica slept beside me, I began making silent notes on my phone. Every suspicious transaction, every lie, every moment of manipulation I could remember from the past 2 years. Starting tomorrow, I would no longer be Peter Miller, the naive son and trusting husband. I would be Peter Miller, the man who discovered he had been underestimated his entire life. And that would be the biggest mistake they ever made. The next morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. with a clarity of mind I hadn't felt in years. Jessica was still sleeping soundly beside me, probably exhausted after a night of making up lies about imaginary meetings. For the first time in months, I had a purpose. I quietly went down to my home office and opened my laptop. Over the next 2 hours, before Jessica woke up, I began building a detailed dossier of every suspicious transaction, every lie, every moment of manipulation I could remember. Dave had given me a solid foundation, but I needed more. Much more. My first stop was the bank, but this time not as the naive husband asking for statements. I went as Peter Miller, heir to Miller Construction, requesting a full audit of all business accounts for the past 2 years. "There are some discrepancies we need to look into for tax purposes," I explained to the business account manager. "Nothing urgent, just due diligence." What I discovered over the next 48 hours surpassed even my worst suspicions. M&J Consulting wasn't just a shell company, it was an elaborate scheme that included forged documents, fabricated references, and even a professional-looking website that appeared legitimate. They had spent months creating a perfect front to justify the theft. But I found something Dave had missed: an additional bank account in Miami, opened 6 months ago, with an additional $300,000 transferred from Miller Construction. $300,000 that I had personally authorized, believing I was investing in new equipment to expand our government contracts. I called Dave immediately. "We need to meet again. I found more evidence." "Peter, you have to be careful. If they suspect, you know." "They won't suspect because I'm going to give them exactly what they're expecting, a trusting idiot who would never question his own family." That night, over dinner, I tested my new strategy. "Jessica, honey, my dad mentioned that you two talked about investments recently." She almost choked on her wine, but recovered quickly. "Oh yes. He asked me for my professional opinion on some contracts. You know how he values outside perspectives." "What kind of contracts?" "Nothing too specific. Just general talk about expansion." She smiled, but I could see the tension around her eyes. "That's great. I always said you should get more involved in the family business." The look of relief on her face was almost comical. She really believed I was as naive as they pretended I was. Over the next few days, I kept up the perfect facade of the obedient son and confident husband. I arrived at the office on time, signed the documents my father placed in front of me, and even suggested a few improvements to the processes that would subtly sabotage their ability to continue stealing. "Peter," my father said one Thursday, "you've been very cooperative lately. I'm impressed with your business acumen." "I learned from the best," I replied, and it wasn't a lie. I had learned from him, learned how to recognize manipulation when I saw it. But while I kept up this performance during the day, I spent my nights building the most meticulous case any prosecutor could dream of. Dave managed to install additional recording equipment not only in the office, but also in my father's car and even in the Miami apartment they had rented with my money. The recordings revealed details that made me physically sick. "The idiot signed the transfer for $200,000 yesterday," I heard my father say. "He said it was for a new excavator. Like I don't know, he'll never check to see if the excavator actually exists." "Is he getting dumber or more desperate to impress you?" Jessica asked. "Both. It's almost sad how much he wants my approval. It makes our job a lot easier." Sad. My own father thought my dedication to my family was sad. But the conversation that really sealed their fate happened on a Friday night when I thought Jessica was home watching a movie with me, but she had gone to meet my father at the secret apartment. "When are you going to leave, Peter?" I heard my father ask. "Right after we transfer the rest of the company funds. A few more weeks and we'll have $800,000 clean. After that, I can file for divorce claiming he's emotionally unstable. The fake medical records we prepared will help." "Perfectly. My lawyer said that with the history of alcohol problems and erratic behavior we documented, I can get not only half the assets, but also substantial alimony." "What if he tries to fight it?" Jessica laughed, a sound that used to make me smile, but now sent shivers down my spine. "Robert, honey, Peter has never fought for anything in his life. He's always accepted whatever you've decided for him. Why would it be any different now?" Why would it be any different now? If you've been following this journey of discovery and planning, subscribe to the channel to see how far a person can go when they discover they've been underestimated by their own family. They were right about one thing: I had never fought for anything before. I had always trusted that doing the right thing, working hard, and being loyal would be enough. But as I listened to my wife and father laugh at my naivety, I made a decision that would change everything. On Monday, I would do something that would surprise even Dave Richardson. I wouldn't just collect more evidence. I would begin implementing a plan that would ensure they paid not only for what they stole, but for every moment of humiliation, every laugh at my expense, every time they treated me like a useful idiot. The naive and trusting Peter Miller would die that weekend. And in his place would be someone they never expected to face. The following Monday, I arrived at the office at 7 in the morning, 2 hours before my usual time. I had work to do. Over the weekend, Dave had installed additional cameras in the office and taught me how to operate them remotely. Every move would be documented. At 9 o'clock sharp, my father arrived with Jessica. They didn't even bother to pretend anymore. She walked in the front door, greeted the receptionist as if it were normal, and went straight to his office. Through the recording system, I heard everything. "We transferred the last $200,000 today," my father said. "After that, we can speed up the divorce proceedings." Perfect. My lawyer has already prepared the documents alleging mental instability and alcohol addiction. With the fake medical history we created, it will be easy. That was the cue I was waiting for. At 10 o'clock, I knocked on the door and entered without waiting for a response. "Dad, I need to talk to you about..." "Oh, Jessica. What a surprise to see you here so early." They stepped aside slightly but maintained their composure. "Peter." Jessica smiled, kissing my cheek. "I came to discuss some legal matters with your father. Contract issues, you know how it is." "What a coincidence," I replied, closing the door behind me. "I also came to talk about contracts. Specifically, M&J Consulting." The silence that followed was deafening. My father was the first to react. "M&J Consulting? I don't know what you're talking about." "Interesting," I said, taking a briefcase out of my jacket. "Because I have here $240,000 in transfers to that company over the last 8 months. A company I discovered is jointly owned by the two of you." Jessica turned pale. "Peter, you're confused. Let me explain." "Let me explain first," I interrupted, opening the folder. I discovered some fascinating things over the weekend. For example, that you have an apartment in Miami. That Jessica created a fake medical history claiming I have alcohol problems. And that you plan to leave me with nothing after the divorce. My father stood up slowly. Where did you get this information? From the same source that showed me this, I replied, turning on the tape recorder Dave had given me. Jessica's voice echoed through the room. Robert, honey, Peter has never fought for anything in his life. He's always accepted whatever you've decided for him. Why would he be any different now? Jessica tried to grab the tape recorder, but I kept it out of her reach. You thought I was too naive to find out. You thought I would never question my own family. My voice was calm, controlled. You were right. The Peter of a month ago would never have questioned you. Peter, son, you don't understand, my father began. I understand perfectly. I understand that you stole $540,000 from the company and from me. I understand that you planned to destroy my reputation so you could keep it all. And I understand that you completely underestimated who you were manipulating. I pulled more documents from the folder. Dave Richardson is very efficient. These are copies of all the illegal transfers, all the recordings of you planning the scam, and all the falsified medical documents. Oh, and I also have this. I showed them an official document. A court order freezing all your accounts, including the one in Miami and MNJ Consulting. Effective as of 8 a.m. today. Jessica finally lost her composure. You can't do this. I'm his wife. She was my wife. Until she signed the divorce papers an hour ago. My lawyer filed them based on evidence of adultery and marital fraud. My father tried one last card. Peter, I'm your father. We can work this out as a family. Family. I laughed without humor. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't spend 2 years planning the destruction of someone they trust unconditionally. I took my phone out of my pocket and dialed a number. Dave? It's Peter. You can call the police now. They're here. Jessica tried to run for the door, but I blocked her way. Where are you going? The airport? Oh, I forgot to mention, I canceled all your reservations for Miami. I also contacted the bank there. Apparently, moving stolen money across state lines is a federal crime. My father slumped into a chair, finally understanding the magnitude of what he had lost. How did you find out? Jessica asked, her voice breaking. You taught me, I replied. For years, you taught me that hard work and loyalty would be rewarded. When I discovered that you were betraying those values, I simply applied the same dedication to documenting every crime you committed. Sirens began to wail outside. You spent 2 years calling me naive, stupid, pathetic. You thought I would accept any explanation you gave me. I looked them straight in the eye. You were half right. The old Peter would have accepted it. But that Peter died the day I heard you laugh at my naivety. The police entered the room, and I calmly handed all the evidence to the lead investigator. These are the documents you requested. Fraud, embezzlement, document falsification, and conspiracy. All documented. As Jessica and my father were handcuffed, they looked at me with a mixture of shock and anger. Peter, my father said as he passed me, you've destroyed your own family. No, I replied. You destroyed them when you decided I wasn't worth your honesty. I just made sure you paid for the consequences. After they were taken away, I sat down in the chair of the president of Miller Construction, legally mine now, since all the fraudulent documents had been nullified. Dave entered the room and sat down across from me. How does it feel? He asked. I thought about the question for a moment. For 2 weeks, I had imagined this moment. I had expected to feel satisfaction, maybe even pleasure at the revenge. But what I felt was something different. Relief. As if a weight I had been carrying for years had finally been lifted. Free, I replied finally. For the first time in years, I feel completely free. Starting tomorrow, I would have to rebuild not only the company, but also my life. Without Jessica, without my father, without the people I had trusted blindly. But as I looked out the window of the office that was now officially mine, I felt no fear for the future. I felt for the first time in a long time, that the man staring back at me in the glass was someone I respected. 3 months later, I sat in the courtroom as the judge read the final sentence. Robert Miller, for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, you are sentenced to 7 years in federal prison and full restitution of the stolen funds." My father kept his head down. At 62, 7 years meant he would walk out of prison an old man, with no company, no family, and no reputation he had spent decades building. "Jessica Miller, on the same charges, you are sentenced to 5 years in prison and to pay joint restitution." Jessica finally cried. Not the manipulative tears I knew so well, but the genuine despair of someone who finally understood that her actions had consequences. As they were led away in handcuffs, Jessica turned to look at me one last time. Her lips moved silently. "Forgive me." I didn't respond. Forgiveness was something that might come with time, but in that moment, all I felt was a sense of justice being served. In the months that followed, rebuilding Miller Construction was more challenging than I had imagined. Customers were wary of the company after the scandal, and several contracts were cancelled when the news spread. But something interesting happened. The employees, who had always seen me as the boss's son, began to respect me in a whole new way. "Peter," said Tom, our senior construction supervisor, one Monday, "all these years, I thought you were just lucky to be born a Miller. But after what you did, man, you're more Miller than your own father." The trust one gained from the employees spread to the customers. Local business owners began coming to me directly, impressed not only by my ability to detect fraud, but by the meticulous way I had documented everything. "Anyone who can expose a scheme like that is someone I can trust with my money," said Margaret Hamilton, owner of the largest competing construction company in town. "How about we talk about a partnership?" Within 6 months, not only had I recovered all the lost contracts, but I had signed 3 new projects worth more than $2 million. The financial recovery was surprisingly complete. The court froze all of Jessica's and my father's accounts, including the Miami apartment and the investments they had made with the stolen money. I recovered not only the original $540,000, but also the interest and additional compensation for emotional distress. But the money was only part of the victory. The real gain was discovering who I really was when everything I thought defined me was stripped away. For years, I lived to impress my father, seeking his approval with every decision. Now, making decisions on my own for the first time, I discovered I had even better business instincts than he did. I implemented financial transparency systems that made it impossible to repeat the kind of fraud they had committed. I created an advisory board with employees from different levels, ensuring that no important decisions were made in isolation. Miller Construction not only survived the scandal, it thrived in a way it never had under my father's leadership. Dave Richardson became not only my trusted investigator, but a close friend. During one of our monthly follow-up meetings, he made an observation that struck me deeply. "Peter, do you know what their fatal mistake was?" he asked, sipping coffee in my new office. "Underestimating my intelligence?" "No. Their mistake was believing that loyalty is synonymous with stupidity. They mistook his dedication to family for an inability to think for himself. By the time they realized they were wrong, it was too late." He was right. For years, my unwavering loyalty had been interpreted as naivety. My willingness to trust had been seen as weakness. But it was precisely those qualities that allowed me to meticulously document every crime, remain calm throughout the process, and build a case that was impossible to refute. 6 months after the trial, I received an unexpected phone call. "Peter? It's Helen, Jessica's sister." Helen had always been distant during my marriage. We rarely spoke beyond basic greetings at family events. "Helen, hi. How can I help?" I wanted to apologize and explain some things. We met at a neutral cafe in the city center. Helen looked like she had aged years in a few months. "Peter, I knew," she said, looking me straight in the eye. "Not about the money, but about the affair. I saw Jessica and her father together a few times and I should have told you." "Why didn't you?" "Because I thought you already knew and had chosen to ignore it. You seemed so happy in public." She shook her head. "Now I realize it wasn't happiness. It was you being genuine and her being her." The conversation with Helen gave me a different perspective on the entire period of my marriage. How many people had noticed signs that I, because I trusted too much, hadn't seen? "Jessica called me from prison last week," Helen continued. "She said she spends her days trying to understand how you found out. She still can't believe that naive Peter was able to build such a solid case against her. And what did you say? That maybe the problem was never your naivety, but her arrogance. A year after the trial, my life had changed in ways I could never have imagined. Miller Construction was more prosperous than it had ever been. We had 53 employees, an impeccable reputation, and a waiting list of clients. Personally, I discovered that I enjoyed living alone. For the first time in my adult life, my decisions were entirely my own. From the color of the walls to the company's investments, everything reflected my personality and values. I met new people, not through business events or family functions, but through hobbies and interests I had never had time to explore. I started playing the guitar, something I had always wanted to do but Jessica considered childish. I joined a hiking group on Saturdays. I even signed up for a cooking class, discovering that I had a talent for creating elaborate dishes. Small freedoms that together built a version of myself that I deeply respected. In December, exactly 1 year after discovering the betrayal, I received a letter in prison. It was from my father. Peter, the letter said, I know I have no right to write to you, much less ask for forgiveness. But I need you to know that not a day has gone by in the last few months that I haven't regretted every decision I made. The letter went on for 3 pages, detailing his regret, explaining that greed had corrupted his judgment, and admitting that I had always been the son he should have cherished. You built our company in a year more than I did in decades. You showed integrity where I showed corruption. You honored the Miller name in a way I never did. The letter ended with a confession that surprised me. Jessica came to me first. She said you were too weak to stand up to me if you found out what we were doing. I should have stood up for you then. Instead, I believed her. That was my worst mistake. I read the letter 3 times before folding it carefully and putting it in a drawer. I didn't respond immediately, but I didn't throw it away either. Forgiveness, I discovered, is not a decision you make instantly. It's a process that happens gradually as you rebuild your life and realize you can choose to carry bitterness or move on. 2 years after the trial, Miller Construction had become the most respected construction company in the region. We won the contract to build the new municipal hospital, the largest project in the city's history. At the groundbreaking ceremony, the mayor publicly congratulated me. Peter Miller has represented not only business excellence, but also the personal integrity that this city deeply admires. As applause echoed through the crowd, I looked out at the site where a hospital would soon rise that would save lives for decades. This was the legacy I wanted to leave. Not just a thriving company, but tangible contributions to my community. That night, I called Dave Richardson. Dave, you once asked me how I felt after getting revenge. At the time, I said I felt free. Today I have a more complete answer. What is it? I feel grateful. Grateful that Jessica and my father underestimated me so much that they forced me to discover who I really was. If it weren't for their betrayal, I might have spent my entire life being a lesser version of myself. That's an interesting perspective, Peter. The best revenge wasn't seeing them in prison. It was discovering that I was capable of things I didn't even know I could do. They tried to destroy me, and they inadvertently set me free. If you've made it this far on this journey of family betrayal and personal reconstruction, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories of people who turned their biggest defeats into the most meaningful victories of their lives. 3 years later, Jessica was released on parole for good behavior. I hear she's working as a cashier at a grocery store in another city, trying to rebuild her life away from the wreckage of her past choices. My father still has 4 years left to serve. We continue to exchange letters occasionally. They contain no requests for forgiveness or attempts at justification, just updates on how we're using our time. In his latest letters, he mentioned that he is teaching literacy to other inmates and has found a satisfaction he never felt running the company. Sometimes the most painful falls reveal who we really are when they strip away everything we thought defined us. Last week, I completed 5 years running Miller Construction on my own. The company now has 120 employees, 3 branches in neighboring towns, and a reputation for excellence that extends far beyond our region. But the milestone I'm most proud of isn't financial or professional. It's the fact that when I look in the mirror today, I see a man I respect completely. Someone who chooses honesty even when lying would be easier. Someone who builds rather than destroys. Someone who has learned that true strength doesn't come from controlling others, but from knowing yourself deeply. Jessica and my father thought I was too naive to discover his lies. They were right about one thing: I was naive. Naive enough to believe that family meant loyalty. To trust without question. To value relationships over profit. But what they didn't realize is that those naive qualities also gave me the patience to meticulously document every crime, the determination to seek justice instead of revenge, and the wisdom to turn betrayal into personal growth. In the end, the naivety they despised was exactly what ensured their downfall and my rise. The last I heard, Jessica was still working at the supermarket, living in a one-bedroom apartment, trying to rebuild the life she destroyed. Me? Well, last night I had dinner on my terrace, contemplating plans for our fourth branch, grateful to have discovered that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones others underestimate.